Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Katie, for having me on.
Of
Really. Thank
course.
you. We Best Friends was established back in 1984 by a group of folks. They're the founders, and they uh, have devoted their entire lives to raising up awareness for animals in the shelters that are losing their lives every day. They have devoted their lives to ending the killing of animals in our nation's shelters by the year 2025. And by golly, we're going to do it. We work really hard to continually evolve our processes and utilize all the resources that we have, and we're just so grateful to have any opportunity to, I spend a lot of my efforts, like yourself, trying to help ease the suffering of those who are either affected by the loss of their loved ones, their four-legged, two-legged, feathered, slithery friends, whoever was their best friend. They always take a piece of us when they go. And to honor that, and to also help our folks who are on the front line, who are working in those shelters, who are working in those programs, really devoting their lives to this life-saving work. So, Best Friends, we have a sanctuary. That's where I'm calling you from, here in Kanab, Utah, which is the nation's largest no-kill sanctuary. And we have upwards of 1,600 animals. We have, I would say, oh golly, about 400 dogs, 500 cats, and then the rest are bunnies, horses, parrots, pigs. But our big drive there is to help assist shelters by helping take in some of the more difficult to place animals, and to find them loving homes so we can continue to do more. And with that comes a tremendous amount of caring, giving staff and members and donors and all the people who care about animals and wanting to help them find a safe space. So I'm just grateful to you for opening up today so that we can help people, and we can, maybe perhaps give some resources.
Absolutely. And that sounds wonderful. I mean, that's just tremendous. And you do allow visitors and volunteers, correct? Because it's top
Oh,
of my bucket list.
absolutely. I'll roll out the red carpet for you. We would love to show people how we bring in our animals and we treat them and we help them. A lot of times they come with medical and behavioral issues, so we have to address those needs up front and then get them ready to be adopted into their new homes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I know we're here to talk about a very sensitive, heart-touching topic. Actually, two: anticipatory grief and pet loss. And I'm wondering, where do you think might be a good place to start? Certainly, there's a couple questions that's already come in, but I'm wondering if there's a topic that we might start with.
I think you bringing up anticipatory grief, that's uh, a real tough one that I think a lot of folks aren't super aware of, that many times they are living in a state of anticipatory grief. Whether you get a diagnosis for your pet or even your family member, that you now know something is progressing, and it could be 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but it definitely sets the tone for how you begin to relate to your life with that particular individual.
Absolutely. And, I think that anticipatory grief, and that is a psychological term, sometimes when we name things, it makes it more real, and we're better to cope with it. But I actually think anticipatory grief can be more difficult because they're still here with us, and we want to make every moment count. We want to make the most out of everything. And I know when I've had a pet before with a diagnosis and kind of that timeline, I'm scared to be away from them, even just for a minute. And I put
Oh,
extraordinary pressure on myself to make their days perfect. And something else that might happen is we might become hyper vigilant around their care. We might check what they're eating. We might check all aspects of their life, and that's really difficult, to kind of sustain living that way. And I would just encourage all of us who are experiencing anticipatory grief to be as present as possible, because, gentle reminder, our animals just want to be loved. They just want to be right by our side, and that's what we can do for them. And I think anticipatory grief is also where, it helps to have a really good relationship with your veterinarian and that you trust them. Working in my day job as the director of the Veterinary Mental Health Initiative, I know that vets, they really do have a clinical checklist, when it comes to humane euthanasia. But I
mhm.
think preparing with them, and having a better understanding of what this, timeline might look like, can take away a lot of the anxiety and the unknown, and that can really help with anticipatory grief.
That is a really good point. Um, Actually getting that sorted out for yourself right from the get-go. And then, in my opinion, put it behind you. You know that. You know that part. Now let's look at a bucket list. What does that bucket list look like? What are your favorite things to do? And what are the memory makers? My cat O'Malley, I was very fortunate for him to live to be over 22 years old.
Mm.
I knew that we were getting into the roundup phase, and there was this day where he just loved to, like, grab onto my arm and hold it and make these biscuits. And I put on the Aristocats, and we watched the Aristocats together, and I sang all the songs to him. And now, does he know that he was watching the Aristocats? Probably not. But he knew that we had this moment where we were hugging together and I'm singing to him. But I have that memory too going forward. He got snuggles and loves like we did every day. But this was a particular moment in time that I can say, we just took a couple of hours and did that. Or is it a favorite walk or a favorite toy, or it doesn't have to be anything monumental. It has to be about maybe just stopping for a minute and thinking, what is important to you? Is it rolling in the grass? What is it? But I think in anticipatory grief, you also need to talk to everyone, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to them about your plans and what you're feeling, because a lot of times that helps a lot more than you think. Um, just verbalizing that, and that, hey, we're taking advantage of every moment we have, and we're going to do these things. And um, yeah, I think that one of the things too that I wanted to mention with that is you can make a scrapbook of memories, right? Because when you are on the other side of you have something that you refer back to. Oh my gosh, I remember that day we went to the park and we ran into blah blah. It's just,
Totally.
yeah, I think it's comforting.
That's absolutely it. And I always say this is the time for the photos. Even better if you can do videos, because videos show them, being with you and really being in that moment. But exactly everything that you just said.
Well, and it's interesting too. We have, I think you and I discussed this before on what is, everybody asks a question, do I want to know or do,
Mm.
and there's pluses and minuses on both sides of that equation. And on the other side of the coin of anticipatory grief is sudden loss. And we're getting a lot of questions about curious Whippet Fine Art said they lost their dog tragically and are struggling to bond with their new dog. And lots of people who are saying they're struggling to bond with a new pet after pet loss. And that's that's a real big question, and it's very personal. I'm interested in your opinion, Dr. Katie. How do you know when the time is right to let that new pet into your life? It just seems to be such an individualized, personal decision.
Absolutely, and you touched on several aspects there, and I'd love to provide a little bit of psychoeducation on everything that was just brought up. So we don't solely grieve our pets passing. We also grieve all the future moments that we don't have with them physically here, that we thought we had with them, that we kind of counted on. And I think that is especially true if we expected them to live longer than they did. And I think there is a tendency for us pet parents to focus on our pets passing and maybe the events leading up to that day, especially if that loss was sudden, unexpected, or traumatic. And what can be really helpful is that up until that moment, they lived and there were glorious times, and no one can ever take those memories away from you. Now, with regards to a new pet, obviously this is a deeply personal decision, and I just say you have to trust your heart and your intuition on this. As animal people, we have so much love to give, and for some of us it can feel really healing and comforting to rescue another pet. It can make us feel like we have a life again, and we have some of our identity back as a dog mom, a cat mom, a dog dad, a cat dad, a bird mom. um, but I also want to validate that it can be incredibly painful as well to rescue again. A gentle reminder to those who do adopt that this is going to be a new, unique little creature with its own habits and personalities and quirks. This will not be the pet that you lost. And I think rationally, of course, all of us know this, but I can't tell you, Patty, more than a handful of times I've heard, on an emotional level, we were hoping that this new pet would fill that tiger-sized hole or that Bella-sized hole in our heart. And I think if we can remember that on not only a cognitive but on an emotional level too, that might inform our decision of when to adopt and rescue again.
I think that's fantastic. It's yes, you're right. I mean, it is a completely personal and individualized, decision. The other thing I could think of too is you don't have to do anything right away.
Yes,
You,
absolutely.
if you want, you could foster, or you could go walk dogs at your shelter and just say, hey, in memory of Buffy, I'm coming to just walk dogs, or memory of Tiger, I'm just coming to clean cat kennels and get some kitten snuggles. And I don't have to make any decisions right now. I always say, tell Judge Judy to take the jury and sequester him for a while. No decisions need to be made. No, we don't have to decide yay or nay today. And you still go get those snuggles and feels. You can still bring an animal into your home and foster. What you're doing is you're giving their adoption folks some information that would help that animal find the right placement. So you're still doing a service for the animals, and you don't have to necessarily commit at that time.
Well, That's exactly it. You know, when we're deep in our grief, we still have so much to offer. And I think when we do acts of kindness for other people, particularly animals, if we're animal people, we feel a sense of purpose that maybe we have lost um, in the passing of our pets. You know, and you brought up such great examples, and I'll add to that. You know, you can donate. Everyone has old blankets, old towels, old sheets. Take those down to your shelter. You know, volunteer for an hour. You could even take. I know. Something that brought me a tremendous amount of comfort. I have an elderly neighbor who's not able to get out of his house as much as he liked to. So I volunteered to take his dog for a walk. And, you know, I like to gently remind everyone that often the most heartfelt, genuine gestures don't cost any money at all.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. And, you know, I think about things like there's sometimes a lot of feelings we have to unpack after our animals pass. You know, there's guilt, there's shame, there's jealousy, there's, you know, a friend of ours brought jealousy up the other day.
Mm.
My dog had, you know, cancer and their dog had cancer, but theirs did well on treatment and mine didn't. And I wish I had that. Or, you know, the guilt of I should have known what I didn't know. And, and we all do this to ourselves. We all go into this place of, you know, I had a dog one time, she wouldn't eat, and then all of a sudden she wanted everything, and I was like, yes, and then all of a sudden it gave her crazy diarrhea, and it was like, no. And then you know, we all live in this very fragile
Mm.
in connection with our pets and trying to do absolutely the best by them. And that's what we have to remember, is that's where we're operating from. And you cannot beat yourself up over what you didn't know.
Well, I'm so grateful to you that you brought up the topic of guilt, because I will say, as a psychologist who specializes in anticipatory loss and anticipatory grief, excuse me, and pet loss, guilt is probably the topic that I see the most by a large margin. And so I'd like to take a minute, if it's just okay. Obviously, this isn't a therapy session, and guilt is something we would unpack over days, weeks. So obviously, you know, this is a live, but briefly, you know, when we lose a pet, again, especially for those of us where the loss was sudden, unexpected, or traumatic, we as humans often tend to blame ourselves, especially for certain aspects. Maybe, just like you said, maybe we believe we missed signs of their illness or the disease that they passed from, and if we only would have acted earlier. Or we believe that we should have been able to prevent their death from happening. Gosh forbid it was, you know, an accident. Or maybe we believe that we should have been able to behave differently in the moment, if we were stronger in the vet's room, if we didn't break down. You know, we're only human. But what happens when we start having those types of thoughts, should have, could have, would have, we start to develop corresponding emotions. So, for example, if we believe that we should have been able to save our companion animal, then of course we're absolutely going to feel guilt, shame, and several other just heartrending, horrible, just negative emotions about ourselves. And so over time, what happens is the more that we continue to think about the loss through that lens, from that perspective, the more we're going to get trapped in this cycle of guilt and shame. So, what do? We need to develop a more realistic recollection of what actually happened when they passed. But most of us don't want to do that because we don't want to go back to that time. We think we're going to move forward and we don't want to go back. But we really do need to go back, and we need to ask ourselves some questions. You know, what was I thinking was the best thing to do at the time?
Mm-hmm.
What information did I have, you know, both from myself, from my observations, and from my vet? What financial resources did I have? And could I have known, could I have predicted what was going to happen? And most of the time, if we're really honest with ourselves, you'll remember that you loved your animal deeply and you did everything you could for them, given what you knew and what you felt at that time. And just some final words on guilt. Our brain as humans is hardwired to fix problems, to find solutions. That's the whole point of our brain. But with guilt, we believe that there's a problem or an issue, and if we can just figure it out, it's going to be okay. But in this case of our pets passing or they're being diagnosed with a terminal illness, there is no solution, there is no answer. And so in a really twisted way, how you said this earlier, it's easier for some of us to just really beat ourselves up than it is to accept the loss. And we as humans can be really good at being pretty cruel to ourselves when we're experiencing grief instead of being kind and compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely. And also one of the things that I hear all the time, is it too soon? Is it too late? I'm afraid he's still eating and drinking. I feel like it's too soon. And then some critical point happens. Oh my God, I waited. It was too late. And what we have to do is give ourselves the permission to say, we were in the window. It was the window. Don't try not take it all the way down to the minutes before. It's very common, I believe, for I'll liken this to when my dad passed away. I spent several months with him in the hospital, and all I focused on after his death were those 3 months. Those 3 months. What we should have done, could have done. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Why didn't I do that? It just went on. And then I had to pull myself really far away to say, I'm 50. Well, then, I was 52 years old. I had 52 years and 3 months. There were vacations, there were laughs, there were trips, there was hanging out, doing whatever. There's my dad, right? And I think about this with my pets. It's the same thing. I tended to go to that last month of their life. And yet there was 10, 12, 15 years of all kinds of memories that were built up. And we do have to go through somewhat of that hazing of picking apart those last moments to lay our own brains to rest. But we do need to remind ourselves that there is all that time, And there, we had a question from someone who says that, and also, I'm going to put this in the parking lot. We still haven't addressed how to, after loss, to bond with the new pet. I did not forget you. We went off on a tangent. There's so much to discuss here. It's hard. It's hard just to force. But
Patty, on that note, just before we move on, because I think this is so important. I work closely with two veterinarians, Dr. Lisa Littman, Dr. Monica Tarantino, and just briefly, they would always say, better a day too soon with humane euthanasia than a day too late. And I remember the first time they said that, it really took me aback. I am obviously not a veterinarian, but they said that suffering or hurt is ameliorated when it's done humanely, and you are doing what is in the best interest of your pets. I just wanted to put that out there for those of you that thought a day too soon. No, that actually we need to put that thought to the side.
I totally agree on that, and that's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Exactly.
And so not to bounce around, but to bounce just a little bit, I wanted to finish this thought with the person who wants to help her sister whose dog passed away. I think this is a great ending to this particular conversation, in helping them unpack. Try not take their guilt away. Try not, you know, you're not going to take their pain away. The best thing you can do is listen and let them unpack it all. And Dr. Katie, I'm sure you have a lot more to say on that.
Oh gosh, you know, Patty, when we were speaking last week, you shared such a beautiful story of being there for your friend. And I think what I would say is consider who this loved one is, and then think about what they would find meaningful during this heartbreaking time, because we're all very different, but you know your loved ones best. Just some suggestions with regards to actions you can do. You know, you can leave a flower or a plant, you could leave a meal or a note on their porch. You could donate to their favorite animal welfare, animal rescue organization, or you could drop off supplies and towels, food. You could have coffee delivered to their house, especially if you feel like they might be dreading getting out of bed. You can offer to run errands for them, like to the grocery store. When we're deep in grief, the last thing we want to do is those mundane tasks. Um, or you can offer to babysit maybe their kids for an hour or two, so they can find some time for quiet and peace. With regards to things you might want to say, you know, do you want to talk about it? My favorite thing about your pet was, I don't know the right thing to say right now, but please know you're in my thoughts and heart. You were an amazing dog mom, amazing horse mom, to, and then the pet's name. And maybe a good one might also be, I'm here to support you if you want me to be. As someone who identifies as 100% introvert, I'm a couple of my friends in the past have sent me a text that said, you know, no need to text me back. So honestly, the relief goes right there, because, you know, when I'm deep in grief, I just need to be
Right.
alone for a while. And it says, no need to text me back, but I'm thinking of you and I'm here to be of support in any way that I can. And that one really resonates with me.
Yeah, I love all of those. And I'm just going to add one more little one there. Well, not little, but it requires some deep thought about that animal and what was important to them. Ask him if you want to help make a memorial. Do a little memorial. I had a friend who tragically lost her dog, and he loved to back up to the shrubs and poop on them. That was his thing. He loved to poop on the bush. And so I sent her a bonsai tree that she could put a little plastic poop right there on the tree, have it in the house. And it gave her so much joy to think about that aspect of him. And of course, it doesn't take away all the pain. You know, you can't do that for anyone, but you can also help zero in on what was that thing about that animal that they found funny, poignant, you know, and really show that you were thinking of them and doing something that was very specific and personal.
And that's it. That's exactly it. As pet parents, what matters the most to us in grief is that our pet is never forgotten, that they live on, and they live on not only with us, but our loved ones that knew them. So the most, you know, personal, specific, you may even want to ask, what do you want your pet's legacy to
Right.
be? Imagine getting that question. You would feel so loved and so warm in that moment. I think you actually absolutely just touched on it. I think that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I was so excited when it occurred to me to do that. And then I kept waiting. Did you get it? Did you get it? Get the mail. So this does actually now circle back to our earlier questions on the struggle to bond with a new pet after loss. And Dr. Katie, you just said it there, you know, their memory is never lost.
Never.
that memory lives in your heart forever. That all the things, right? The new,
It's so,
whether you feel a little regretful that maybe you acted too soon, it's not too late to develop new habits and new fun things, and find even just one thing that you two are now going to do, even if it's in memory of the pet that passed, something that bonds the two of you together with that experience.
absolutely. I would just say have patience with yourself. Have patience with this new little creature. It will come with time. It will never be the same, but we don't want it to be the same. The bond that I had with my previous companion animals, I'm never going to forget that. You know, that's interesting. It's often one of people's biggest fears that they're going to forget the memories. I promise you, as a psychologist, you are not going to forget. But if you do want to write them down, so you have them forever, or what appeals to a lot of people is just to make a video on your phone talking about those memories. You never have to share those recordings with anyone, but then they're preserved. But I can promise you, you will never forget them. But just like everything in life, time and patience, and you will bond with that new animal, and you'll create those special moments, those special events that'll just be now the two of you in that relationship, in that bond. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And remember that big tiger size hole you talked about? Well, it took Tiger a long time to, or maybe not, because I fall in love deep, but
I
and
know, me too.
and fast, probably like the rest of you on this show. Um, but it takes a while to to be vulnerable again.
Of course. I like to think of it, it's not going to heal. At best, we're going to have this thick level of scar tissue, but it's not going to heal. And so exactly waiting for that scar tissue to grow over to a point where you're not bleeding out anymore, that takes time.
Well, we have a question here, and boy, this one really just it's a toughie, because um I tend to get really frustrated with people who don't have empathy. Sorry. And this someone, you both understand the impact of pet loss. How do we handle those who aren't as sympathetic and don't understand, like friends or coworkers, like the person, and this, I'm putting this in here, but I've been told, oh my gosh, it's been 2 weeks, and you just want to, ah, you know, boom, boom.
Absolutely.
It's
This is
very
an out.
sensitive. It's obviously they don't understand the love of a pet, so they're almost to be pitied more than anything. But
I think, Patty, that's it. I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if the people in our lives gave us the support and the comfort that we needed? And this is going to sound a little harsh, but from a psychological perspective, that's not possible. And I think obviously it's going to sting and break our hearts when we hear those comments. And we can take those and be like, okay, gosh, so and so is not the one to go to in this particular scenario. And I think if we put up boundaries, boundaries are there to protect us and help
ooh,
us.
one
And
boy,
I think
something
we
all of us could use is some boundary lessons, huh?
I think boundaries, that term, at least lately, gets kind of a negative
It
rap. And yeah, like put up boundaries. Gosh, like, I hear, okay, you're such a kind, vulnerable, warm person, but boundaries are there to protect us. And if we know that, gosh, this colleague, this coworker, or gosh, this relative is not the one to go to. Yes, it's disappointing and it's super frustrating, but in the long run, it's going to protect us. And I think that can be hard at first, but it will serve you well in the long run to know, um, who you can go to. And I think that's why support groups are for pet loss and for anticipatory grief are so helpful, because you're around people that just get it.
Oh, absolutely. And when I dig a little bit deeper, these boundaries are related to expectations. And
Yep.
sometimes we have greater expectations of folks than I don't want to, shoulda, but we maybe shouldn't have that expectation on them. And I know that's a chapter for a whole nother day, but yeah, it's a toughie, because your heart is just so raw at that point,
Well,
right?
I think, Patty, you just brought this completely full circle, because, with fellow humans, especially our loved ones, our relationships are complex, because there's two dynamics, and our relationships with humans are full of highs and lows, breakups, misunderstandings, arguments, hurt feelings. But our pets always manage to make us feel better even on our worst days. And we really come to rely on that unconditional devotion and the meaning and the fulfillment that they bring into our lives. So, they're constants. They've been there through the death of loved ones, they've been there through jobs, through moves. So when they pass, that oftentimes is our most significant relationship, or where we can just be our complete selves without fear of being judged or anything. We're free to be ourselves in their company. And I think that is what makes our relationships with animals so powerful, and then so devastating when we lose them.
Oh, absolutely. They take a big piece of us right when they go. And
Absolutely.
there is support out there. There's you.
Oh gosh, thank you.
I do that work here at Best Friends. But how do people go about getting more support and resources? I wish that there were grief support groups all over, but they're not. They're kind of few and far between. So we do have to rely a lot of times on our own digging for help. But I bet where.
I would always recommend checking with your local Humane Society or SPCA, Best Friends. Oftentimes, I know I'm based in Lake Tahoe and sometimes San Francisco, but I know, for example, that the Tahoe Truckee Humane Society has a grief support group. The Sacramento SPCA has a grief support group, and several others in this area. There's the Pet Loss Community, which was founded by the two veterinarians I referenced early, Dr. Monica Tarantino and Dr. Lisa Littman. They're on Instagram. Their account is at Pet Loss Community, but they offer both individual sessions and support groups. And then I'm also happy if anyone wants to DM me, therapy. Um, Oftentimes sessions are reimbursed with insurance, but if you have a therapist in your area that specializes in this, it is becoming a more understood. I think therapists are really, psychologists and MFTs and LCSWs are understanding the need for this expertise and specialization. So hopefully we will see more counselors and therapists, those with a master's and those with doctorate degrees, offering these services.
I think we're realizing as we come along as a society, right, that grief is grief, loss is loss, love is love. Grief is the price you pay for love. It's, whether it's I lost one of my pet rat and just about flipped off the deep end, because the way it happened, he got sick and he died, and that tried her best, but it was sudden. And you realize whether it was this one little tiny creature or your big, Labrador retriever. It doesn't matter. These losses, they trigger a lot of feels for you, a lot of tragic loss in your life, or when you've lost, I never wanted to compare my dad to a dog because
So
my
you
dad
don't,
was bad, right? But
you
my
don't,
was sick a year after my dad. It triggered so much stuff for me. So much came bubbling up. All the amount of
mm,
on handling and trips to the doctor, and the logical mind at that point takes a back seat. The emotional brain gets triggered, and you have to feel what you feel and work your way through it.
that was so expertly said. And I think it's so important to say this, that grief compounds grief. So even though rationally you know that your father's death is different from your companion animals, yes, your mind can tell you that they're different, but the body, the spirit, the soul, whatever you term it, is going to feel it. And I think, to touch on something you said earlier, with grief being so extraordinary when we lose our animals, I think for a lot of us growing up, loving our animals was safe. Sometimes it's not safe to love people in our lives, or to open our hearts or make ourselves vulnerable.
But like that you're right.
We don't usually hear that with our horse or with our bird or with our reptile. We can be absolutely soul bearing vulnerable with them, and they love us anyway, and that's not always true for humans, unfortunately.
And too, many times a child's first loss is a pet.
And I think that's why pet loss with children, we want to be very careful, because I think about how we handle that as the adults in their life, because that will really set the tone for grief in their life. We need to validate it. We need to make space for it. We need to be there and comfort them, because that will show them that it's okay to grieve. If you, I mean, gosh, I don't want to highlight the negative too much, but could you imagine a little kid being told it's just a dog? They're gonna take that and project it onto their next loss, and they're gonna be told grief is not okay. I won't even give that the time of day, because it's just so important
I'm
to
actually
be.
thinking
Yeah.
right now through the anticipatory stage of grief with one of her pets and her two young children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really interesting how open she is to this, because logically she gets it and her husband get it, but they are being very proactive on how they are going to approach this with their children. And language matters.
Absolutely.
Language is huge. You don't give, you give a dog a drug to go to sleep. You don't give it a medicine, because later on the child is getting medicine to get better. We're not putting Hank to sleep
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to be putting you to sleep later on tonight. And saying things too to children like, he's gone now. We had a client and the children are there, and the doctor said he's gone, and the little boy went over and went, he's right there.
You want to, like, just bawl your eyes out and laugh at
Yeah.
this.
So really mindful of the language that you use with children, along with validating their feelings and letting them write letters and make crayon drawings that they either bury or cremate with their pets, or things that they want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
one a friend of mine, she's amazing, Colleen Ellis, she has two hearts pet loss. She's amazing, and she's a great resource. And she said she brings neon lipstick, and the kids put neon lipstick on and they kiss the pet. And so they have all their kisses all over their cat or their dog or whomever, So just, you can get really creative about how you help children really understand what's happening.
Absolutely. Of course, of course you want to be age appropriate, and, you know, kids are incredibly, especially, our brain doesn't finish developing until we're 26 years old. And so I think kids being very tangible with them, just like you said, having them draw it out, or, if they're younger, maybe act it out with their stuffed animals or with puppets. You can make a garden stone. I've seen kits at Target and at Walmart
Yeah.
that they can have and put in the backyard. Something tangible that I'm not going to put labels on anything, but something that might not be advised is to take down pictures, or to not talk about it,
Oh,
because that's going to be very confusing to them. You're going to want to keep, their bed or their water bowl or whatever it is. Obviously, that's going to be painful for the adults too, but that really quick transition, that's going to be very scary for a little kid.
and
So
talk about
yeah,
it. Talk about it. Let them cry. It's
yeah.
okay. Don't try to take that away. Yeah, and there's a lot of good children book resources out there as well. They're coming up more and more now, just people addressing that, because you're a professional psychologist. I'm sure you see the culmination of years of just missteps we take as human beings, trying to figure it all out and thinking we're doing right by our kids, or the kids whose parents really thought they were doing right by them. And they do have that, you said it, compounded and cumulative grief. And what happens is you end up with a powder keg that's just ready to blow when something really tectonic happens in your life.
No, that's so true. The reaction, oftentimes when all those emotions come flying out, they can come out in the form of anger. But
Right. Yeah.
anger in psychology, what we call a secondary emotion. And I like to think of anger or any related feelings as, like, knights in the medieval days, how they always had the armor on.
Right.
Anger just protects the vulnerability underneath. So if someone's reacting in anger to you, I'd say the vast majority of the time that's there to protect something much more vulnerable
Absolutely.
below the surface. And I think you bring up really good points. There's so much we can do to memorialize our pets in our homes, in our personal space. I've seen some of the most creative ideas. Someone made their dog's leash into a belt. Or, there's cremation jewelry now. Have your child draw a picture, frame it, put it on top of the fireplace, put it on the fridge, the water bowl into the plant holder. There's just so many unique things that can be done to really establish that lasting bond. And you incorporate it into your daily life when you're ready. I do think, you touched on this earlier, Patty, that those first few days and weeks, I call them the surreal time.
Yes.
You're not, that's just a time for self-care and being in the company of people you trust and love. I'm talking about a few weeks later, when the real fog of grief starts to lift, and kind of that dull pain of grief sets in, the one you're going to have for the rest of your journey. That's when we can start doing those things. The first few weeks, you have to be kind and compassionate to yourself.
So tell me this, and
Yeah.
how we wrap this journey today. We don't ever really get rid of grief.
No.
We learn, though, how to live and walk alongside it, and to get on, to move on. But there's so many times that I've heard people say, when is it going to stop? When am I going to, when is the loss going to stop? And, we need to give ourselves a very wide berth to understand that we learn to live with things the best way we possibly can, and that there are tools out there to help us with that. But if we're waiting for it to just all be gone, It's not going to, but we will make peace with it.
I think that's exactly it. Peace is probably my favorite word. I don't think we ever move on. And I'd love to throw that term out the window. I don't think we ever move on. I think we learn to live in a way in time that we believe would make our pet proud of us. And, grief, gentle reminder that grief is very different from person to person. It's a whole spectrum of thoughts, it's a whole spectrum of emotions. There's no cookie cutter grief. But it can provide us an opportunity to reflect on and kind of reprioritize our life and really make changes so that we are doing what's most important to us. And so a good place to start, again, is to be really, really honest with ourselves and think about what it is that we truly care about. And so to get started, like for example, if this were a therapy session, I might ask you, and I never put anyone on the spot, so I always have you take it home and go into a quiet place, but I might ask you to consider some of these questions. So what do I consider a meaningful, fulfilling life to be? What am I proud of? Who do I want to become? What inspires me? What is meaningful to me? What do I want my legacy to be? And what do I want my pet's legacy to be? And I think if grief has really derailed us or we find our life off track, those questions can kind of gently bring us back to where we want to be and can be healing. Absolutely.
I'm a big firm believer of homework.
It is. I think it's hard, just to what my other real passion in life is to demystify therapy or counseling. And I think that it's when we are in a quiet space that we can really do the most transformational work. Absolutely. The most important work, maybe the psychologist or the therapist would help you get to those aha light bulb moments. But the real work is done with yourself, but you have to be in a place where you can be honest and really vulnerable with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I hope everybody's found this helpful. Oh. Are there any other questions that you all might have? Well, I guess we covered it all. No.
And if this has been helpful, please let us know, especially with the holidays coming up and the change of
Absolutely. And my bestfriends.org, we do have a Angels Rest page that has resources on it. We also have a Facebook page for Angels Rest. We have a very lovely cemetery. Somebody just asked, can we keep doing this? Absolutely.
I would be honored. And I think the change of season, summer's kind of the season of distractions, right? We can go outside and usually there's a lot of activities going around, a lot of invitations, barbecues, things like that, wedding season. But I think fall really starts to emphasize home. And obviously our pets were home to us. And I think if you're feeling like an intensity start to build, especially as we head in to the colder months and the winter holidays, I just want to 100% completely normalize and validate that. So if I would be open to doing this again, especially okay, wonderful.
I would love to do this again, and thank you all for your amazing comments. Can people contact you online, Dr. Kate?
Yes, DM me. I'm also available at drkatielawlor@gmail.com. And then again, through the pet loss community, I just want to put out, I volunteer with them. I don't have a paid relationship with them in any way. I've just heard that they're incredibly helpful. So that's why I like sharing that resource as well.
And you can contact me at Patty at bestfriends.org. That's PATTY at bestfriends.org. Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
We'll post this, Patty, as soon as we finished. I'll share it and tag you.
And Dr. Katie, if you want to do this again, I think it'd be great if we got some more, just keep giving us questions that we can work on and come back to you, because I do agree the holidays are a rough time for everybody. They bring up holidays and anniversaries. You know,
You know, Patty, we didn't even talk about another I don't worry. I promise you I won't go into it, but coping with reminders and coping with the holidays and how to, especially if it's the first, second, or third year, how to survive them. And then even maybe it's not enough, we don't want to survive them, maybe we do want to enjoy the holidays, and that's completely okay too. You can grieve and laugh at the same time. And I know there's a lot of guilt about celebrating when they're not here with us. No, we've got so much more we can talk about.
let's do a holiday special. I
Okay.
It'd be great. That's a whole lot to really help folks, get through the holidays. It is a tough time. You know, it's really funny about anniversaries. You know, I will say to myself, it's Tuesday. It doesn't matter. Day, the 29th, or whatever that day is, that's an anniversary. There's a lot of sensory reminders, the feels of just the weather, what's happening during that time. They all things that lead to sense memory around that event.
Totally. And I think as much as we think we're ready, or how you say, it's Tuesday, I can get through this, a lot of times reminders are unexpected. Like, we want our family and friends to ask us how we're doing, but at the same time, we don't want them to ask us because we don't want to necessarily um, cry at a holiday party. And there's lots of psychological coping skills that we can at least have in our pocket. Absolutely. There's so much that we can do with these topics.
Well, I look forward to you and I
Me too.
here again, and looks like there's folks who'd be happy to hear from us again. This is a life's journey for the both of us, and we want you to feel better. We want you to be able to move forward. So bless you all, and thanks for joining. And over to you, Dr. Katie. You're amazing.
Oh God, oh, Patty, ditto. But I think that's the perfect way to leave it. And you know, the best advice, hands down, that I ever got before I saw my very first patient at the Palo Alto VA several years ago on my practicum. I had the clinical psychologist there was a huge mentor to me, and he's just wonderful. And I went into his office kind of panicking, and I said, what do I do? And he said, you know, just be a good human. If we all come to situations with the best intentions, we're gonna say the wrong thing. I'm the most awkward person in the world. But if we're you know, if we're there and our heart is in the right place, that really, I see the hearts going up. That resonates with other people. However we can show up most genuinely and authentically will serve us all so well.